Well, let's put the same question to his opposite number, Shadow Justice Secretary Richard Burgon. Good morning to
Morning,
you.
Kate.
Thank
How are
you
you
for joining us. A bit chilly this morning. Bracing, that's what it is. Election before Christmas.
I'd like to see an election before Christmas. I want to get Boris Johnson and his Thatcherite mates out of Downing Street as soon as possible. So as soon as the EU has agreed that extension so Boris Johnson can't push us through a no deal without a mandate to do so, then we want a general election, not only to get Brexit sorted by, under a Labour government, putting it to a public vote between a credible leave option and remain, but also sorting out all the other crises the Tories have caused in the last 9 years in government, whether it be housing, jobs, public services or austerity.
OK, that's interesting because thanks for the clarity on that, because I didn't know whether your leader meant when no deal off the table was past the extension date, whether it means that now that we get to the 31st of October, if it extends to the 31st of January, you're saying absolutely, from next Monday, we're in a position where we can call for a general election.
Well, that's always been Labour's position. Jeremy and Labour want to get the Tories out as quickly as possible. At my advice sessions on a weekend, people are coming to see me who are suffering because of universal credit, for example. I can't say to them, oh, should we leave the Tories in power for another 9 months? You're going to have to put up with this because of some parliamentary games. We want the Tories out as soon as possible. We want to sort out Brexit. We also want to sort out austerity, which has lasted for 9 years.
Polls say you won't win.
Pardon?
The polls say you won't win.
The polls said we wouldn't win last time.
You didn't.
But I can reveal exclusively on air now that we will win that general election. I believe we will, because people will be asking themselves, not just about Brexit, but about what kind of society do we want? And what Boris Johnson and the Conservatives want is a society that is far more like the United States of America when it comes to public services, workers' rights, consumer protections, and everything else. So I believe we can and will win that general election. I think it'd be an era-defining general election in the same way that it was in 1945.
Yeah, people said you wouldn't win last time and you didn't.
People said we wouldn't win last time, but we gained 3 million votes. We got
still lost. You're still in the opposition benches.
We didn't quite win, but we came back from further behind than we are now, and I believe we will do so again and win this general election. I think people want change. People are frustrated after 9 years of squeezes on living standards, austerity, and ruthless cutbacks to public services. People want and deserve something far better than that. A general election will give them a chance to vote for it.
Yeah, what do you say to those people who suggest we've had peak Corbyn? We're done now with Corbyn. He's never going to win an election. He's like the Michael Foot of the Labour Party now.
Well, the last general election wasn't like the 1983 general election in any way at all. Jeremy Corbyn and the policies that he's proposed and that were in our manifesto last time are very, very popular with the public. Very, very popular with the public when it comes to public ownership of the railways, £10 an hour minimum wage, 1 million council houses, all of abolishing zero-hours contracts. These things are popular because they speak to people's bread and butter day-to-day concerns, and that's why I think we'll get traction in a general election period.
But a general election would be seen as, in all but name, as a second referendum, wouldn't it? And it's really not clear what the Labour Party, well, perhaps where the Labour Party stands, but where the leader stands on Brexit.
I don't think that a general election would be seen as a second referendum in anything but name, because our policy is that a Labour government, if elected, would hold a public vote between a credible leave option and remain. So that would be the second referendum. That would be the confirmatory vote. And actually, when people speak to me, whilst people know, of course, that Brexit is very important and people are frustrated that it hasn't been sorted one way or the other yet, most people I speak to don't raise Brexit as a top issue which affects them and their families personally. They do raise living standards, jobs and public services.
I mean, if we leave when we leave the European Union, people are going to be between £800 and £1,000 worse off.
Of course, because all these things are linked, but I'm saying forefront of people's minds when it comes to their own concerns of themselves and their family isn't the issue of Brexit, whether they leave or remain. It's largely to do with cuts to the NHS, public services, schools, education, and living standards and wages. That's what people are talking about. Of course, you're right, all these things are linked.
One of the reasons the leader is not as clear as he might be on where he stands with the European Union and leaving is because a lot of Labour voters voted to leave.
Yes, about a third of Labour voters voted to leave. But whether people voted leave or remain, they didn't vote to become poorer. Whether they voted leave or they voted remain, they didn't vote for a Boris Johnson deal that takes workers' rights and those protections out of that deal and puts them in the dustbin. So we believe we can speak to
Not
both.
in the dustbin. It can be debated further along the line. It's not in the
It
dustbin.
can be talked about. It can be talked about. But
Dominic Raab said that workers' rights are so important, that's why they've taken out from the legally binding document to be debated later.
of course, and Dominic Raab also said, to build upon that he doesn't believe in economic or social rights, doesn't believe in the Human Rights Act. He's a conviction politician, and his conviction is he believes in the politics of Thatcher and Reagan and doesn't believe in citizens in this country having decent rights.
If there's an election before Christmas, we're running out of time.
Well, we are running out of time. It's going to be before Christmas. I hope it is before Christmas because I want to get the Tories out as soon as possible. So as soon as that extension is agreed, we can call for a general election in order to get Labour into government, not only to sort out Brexit, but to sort out all these other crises that have been caused over the last 9 years.
I'm going to test you to see if you were listening and watching the programme earlier. Do you know when the last election was in December?
I wasn't watching this show. I was on other media. I won't mention what the other media is because they're competitors.
Yeah.
Tell me, when was the last election?
Have a guess, go on.
1912?
Oh, good guess. 1910.
1910. I was only 2 years out, not bad.
Right, that's pretty impressive. And the reason is because we don't want to, presumably you guys don't want to campaign in the winter time, and we don't want people knocking on our doors.
I'm not even wearing a coat this morning. I'm happy campaigning in the cold, in whatever month. I say bring it on.
Okay, it's good to talk to you.